Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
All right, everyone, welcome to today's ASRG webinar. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about ASRG and get some of the legal stuff out of the way. ASRG is a nonprofit organization founded to support the development of the automotive security industry. We have developed a platform and a community to share knowledge, communicate through networks, and to build value with collaboration. This is a community for you, built by you, with the goal to protect our friends and family when using automotive products. If you want to learn more about ASRG or get more involved, please visit our website at www.asrg.io or send us an email at hello@asrg.io. Before we jump into the presentation today, let's get some of the legal stuff taken care of. The views and opinions expressed in this webinar are the views of those that have made them. They do not represent views or opinions of ASRG and are to be considered as informational. The use of this information is to be used by the individual and/or organization at their own risk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, and my name is Harsha. We are going to talk about V2X, which is vehicle to everything, is the hot topic of today's automotive security topic, and the topic around this is we wanted to share some insights about what we have done in the V2X space, as well as also share some insights about the kind of attack vectors and potential attack surfaces that we find on today's connected cars. So before we begin, we just wanted to go over the agenda first and then talk about the topic itself. So largely we would be talking about the technology that the connected cars has introduced us to. How is the technology helping in making the roads and streets safer? Also, a quick introduction about V2X itself. What are the different types of vehicle communication channels that we find? And also, what are the potential attack surfaces that we normally find on a connected car? As I said, we would also want to share some case studies around how different types of V2X devices have been tested by us and what are the kind of attack surfaces that we normally find and the vulnerabilities that we get to see. To end this particular webinar, we will also have a quick high-level introduction to how we perceive this particular ecosystem of connected cars can be secured. So before I get into the topic itself, a little bit about ourselves. So my name is Harsha. I work as a manager here in KPMG India. About 10 years of experience in the industry, and primarily been working around various assessments in automotive, IoT, and IC security assessments. Been dealing with clients from various geographies like India, Middle East, Canada, and so on and so forth. I also happen in my free time meddle around with cars and bikes. So happy to be here. I also have two other colleagues of mine with me today, Unmesh and Ashutosh. I'll let them introduce quickly and then we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks, Harsha. Hey, everyone. This is Unmesh speaking. A bit about myself. I've been working with KPMG for the last 6 years. I work as an assistant manager here of the firm. Primarily in the cybersecurity space. I started off working on application testing, thick lines, cloud, and certain aspects of that. And now, over the recent years, moved into the SCADA security testing, IoT, hardware security testing, and certain aspects around that. I work across different geographies, both in India and outside India. Within India, I work on different sectors of clients, be it banking, transportation, oil and gas, in the Middle East, and telecom sector clients in Australia. In my free time, I like to meddle around with hobby electronic projects. I work with a lot of microcontroller, microprocessor based devices during my free time. Over to you, Ashutosh.
Hello everyone, this is Ashutosh here. I've been a part of the OT and automotive security team at KPMG India for about 3 years now. I've been mainly working on hardware security testing and IoT testing. Being an automotive enthusiast, I have participated in the SAE India Baja racing community as well. Back to Harsha.
All right, thanks, folks. So before we begin, the reason that we are talking about connected cars and the whole ecosystem of having V2X today is because all of us know and also believe that driving in itself is called as a dangerous activity because we do get to see a lot of road accidents these days. If I go over the statistics briefly, as per the statistics that have been collected, there are about 1.35 million people who happen to die in road accidents, and there are about at least 20 to 50 million of them who suffer in a non-fatal injury. So, and also these accidents and road accidents and the injuries that you get to see are mostly within the age, or I mean within the age of between the age of 5 and 29, and the reasons for these could be many. It could be due to speeding, it could be due to influence of alcohol and not using enough safety gears and things, so on and so forth. So to make this better, I think there has been a talk around connected cars and introduction of connected cars, which is going to make this entire situation a little better. And car manufacturers have been working to keep the driver safe, both from others on the road and from themselves. So, we are closer than before to achieving a fully autonomous driving systems and cars on the road. However, I think although the studies suggest that it could reduce fatalities of road accidents up to 94%, this is far from reality, as we all know. Because as we are talking about connected cars, we are talking about the safety aspect around connected cars. We are also talking about how secure these connected cars are and how secure are they going to keep the streets on which they are being driven upon. So if I were to give you a quick example of car itself and what we get to see in a car, there are multiple systems or modules, if I may call it, that we get to see in a car. So if we are to talk about a simple car that just has an engine, which was probably 20 years ago, the maximum that you could get to see on a car was an infotainment system. But a car today has various different modules that are built for various different purposes. You could probably see some of the examples here on the slide, but I'll not get into details of this. But if you are talking about connected cars today, there are various different systems that are implemented on these cars. Some of them may be for cruise control, some of them may be for collision management systems, some of them could be for automated parking systems, or even for autonomous driving systems and things like that. So all of these put together is not only making the car a complicated uh, device in itself, or if I may call it, if I may also call it as a complicated network that is on the road today. The car in itself has various different components being connected to each other. There are various different protocols that are running. So it's a moving network or a mobile network in itself that is on the road today. So with all of these complexities or all of these sophisticated technologies being introduced into a car, it also introduces a lot of vulnerabilities. When I say it introduces a lot of vulnerabilities, with technology also comes a lot of vulnerabilities, as we have already seen it in the rest of IT systems that we have been dealing with for quite some time now, right? So if I were to go over a bit of overview on what kind of potential attack surfaces that we normally get to see on the car, there are many. I mean, the kind of communication channels that are available for you to interact with the car today is not just limited to an aux port that you connect your iPod to, but now you have even wireless communications that are made available on the car. And these communication channels have been used by various different attackers to demonstrate attacks that is that may not need any explanation. But if you are aware of attacks that have been demonstrated on the Jeep, where attackers could hijack the brakes and the transmission. The attacks that have happened on the GM cars, where the trucks were left vulnerable to a remote exploit, where it was capable to track the vehicles to engage their braking systems, as well as Tesla's. I think it's a great example from the recent past where an attacker could remotely control the car from anywhere and cut off the motor as well. So, in terms of the potential attack surfaces that you get to see on the car today, like I said, it's not limited to an aux port anymore, but you get to connect an USB device to the USB port that is available within the car. You get to install apps on the infotainment system. You can even perform a software update of the infotainment system. You can even connect to the OBD connector that is available on the car. So if you were to think of a car itself as a network, there are various different attack surfaces, like performing a malicious firmware update, installing malicious apps on the infotainment system that could possibly steal data from the car itself. Introduce malwares, and also perform attacks such as man-in-the-middle attacks on various different interfaces or CAN interfaces that are available on the within the car itself. So, keeping aside these, you also have another layer of attacks that can happen, which is on the hardware of the car itself, which we will talk about in little detail when we get into the slides further down. Since the car also introduces a lot of communication channels for the user to interact with the car, such as the Bluetooth as well as the Wi-Fi. These also have become an avenue for an attacker to perform various types of attacks to gain remote access to the cars as well. So largely, and all of these drills down to the fact that if one of these communication channels have been compromised, the attacker may even get a chance to get to the heart of the car, which is the ECU, reprogram the ECUs, unlock the ECUs, send arbitrary messages over the CAN interfaces to the ECUs, and so on and so forth. I mean, once an attacker is onto the bus where the messages are transmitted to the ECU, it's almost anything that the attacker can do within the car's network. So largely, if these um, interfaces were to be protected, there are about four different layers that primarily need to be looked at from a car's security point of view. So the ECU itself, it needs to be protected. The network within the car itself needs to be protected, as well as the gateway through which the car makes any communication to the outer world is also something that needs to be protected, as well as the infrastructure within which the car operates also needs to be protected. So largely, these would be the categories around which the car would necessarily need some um, safety controls to be introduced into. So I'll quickly hand it over to Ashutosh to give an round of introduction about how V2X is evolving, what sort of vulnerabilities are being introduced with the introduction of V2X and connected cars.
Thank you, Harsha. So the V2X ecosystem has revolutionized the locomotive sectors over the last decade. So the inception of V2X happened in the introduction of the standardized OBD2 ports, which was used to collect basically diagnostic data back in 1996. So since then we've come a long way from there. Whereas in early 2000s, the automotive industry started integrating these wireless technologies into the vehicles to access basically the data related to cars performance, or maybe keyless start stop or SOS calls and so on. But the V2X technology started to gain a traction around 2015, when it proved itself to be the solution of tomorrow, when it was implemented on Germany's A9 highway and resulted in a better traffic flow and also 35% lesser accidents. So the V2X technology basically currently integrates the mobile network, RDES, TMC, Wi-Fi, and also cellular V2X and the radar technology as well, to build a complete road situational awareness, so that there is a certain amount of information given exchanged between the vehicles, so that the transition from point A to point B becomes much smoother and more efficient. So in the recent past, the automakers have also have started focusing on implementation of these advanced features like autonomous driving, ADAS systems, etc. So this advancement in technology is happening at a rate that has never before has been seen, and is expected to continue in the coming years as well. With this, the connected car is becoming even more sophisticated and is capable of providing an even more personalized driving experience in the whole. Next. So the cybersecurity has become a pressing concern to the automotive industry, as it is impacting the safety of the user as well as the people around it. So hence these regulations and guidelines have been put in place to mitigate these threats posed by these automotive systems which are connected to internet now. So NHTSA is basically have emphasized more on the methods of effective intelligence and information sharing across the industry, so that they can facilitate quick adoption of the industry-wide lessons learned, and also have encouraged the formation of auto ISAC and industry environment, emphasizing mainly on cybersecurity awareness and collaboration across the automotive industry. So coming to WP29, they emphasize mainly on the fact that the manufacturer should have a robust cybersecurity process in place that basically ensure monitoring, detection, response capabilities, and also that these processes should have been designed to quickly identify, mitigate these cyber threats and vulnerabilities, and also needs to be regularly tested and updated, and to ensure that they remain effective for quite some period of time. And along with this, with the technology always improving, that they also need to have a process, and manufacturers should have a clear plan in place to respond to new threats and vulnerabilities, as there are new threats popping up every now and then on the IT sector currently. So it is expected that the automotive sector will also follow the same lines to address these new issues. So, coming to the NIST and ISO 21434, which is basically focusing on the engineering requirements of cybersecurity risk management regarding concepts like product development, production, operation, maintenance, and decommissioning of these electrical vehicles and electronics on the vehicular systems. So this includes either components or interfaces which have the ability to interact with the outside environment, that being, for example, the internet or the infrastructure around it. So additionally, it also talks about categorizing the vehicle systems and assessing the threat models for the same, which is later followed by setting the implementing the security controls and also monitoring the same controls. Next. So V2X, as of what we see today, is a widespread network communication system used in vehicles that allow these cars to communicate among each other as well as the infrastructure or other road users. So potentially to revolutionize the way these vehicles interact on road, it has revolutionized the way vehicles have interacted on the road, and is also seen as a key part of the future autonomous vehicle that is being all brought up into the picture. However, there are concerns about the security of these V2X communication, as these are systems that are interconnected, and also the V2X communication is vulnerable to cyber attack as it is put up on the internet as well. So these V2X communication are one of the most suitable places for attackers to attack and create some kind of loss to property and life. So, for example, there are many cases that an attack could happen through. That could be through spoofing or jamming of V2X signals, which could lead to vehicle being unable to detect other vehicles, or even probably give false information that are being sent to vehicle. Like maybe the vehicle behind could replicate a false information saying there is something ahead, and might give warnings on that and so forth. So, to ensure the security of the V2X communication, these automakers need to implement strong security measures. This includes using encryption to protect messages, using authentication protocols to verify the identity of the senders and also the receivers, and using secure communication protocols to ensure the communication between the two stays between the two. So coming to the specific types of V2X, that is firstly the vehicle to infrastructure, which is a technology that enables the vehicle to communicate with the roadside infrastructure, basically the traffic lights, the road signs, and multiple other things. So these types of communication helps the vehicle to interact with the environment in which they're traveling in, and improve the safety, reduce congestion, and probably even increase the efficiency of the vehicle. So these V2I technology can be used to provide the drivers with improved navigation, enhanced safety features, and real-time traffic information as well. So moving on to the next type of V2X would be the vehicle-to-vehicle communication, which is a type of wireless communication between two vehicles on the moving on the same road, which communicates with each other, giving information about the surrounding environment, maybe warning a vehicle behind about the obstacles in front, and even providing the drivers with some real-time information about their surroundings, including road conditions or traffic signals and so forth. So the V2V communication also helps reduce congestion and improve the fuel consumptions in vehicles, so that the vehicles can be optimized to run uh, better in the environments that they're going through. So V2P, which is a vehicle to pedestrian, it basically allows the vehicle to communicate directly with the pedestrians and other vulnerable road users, such as cyclists, bikers, and so forth. So the system sends out an alert to both the drivers and the pedestrians on the road when they come in close proximity. So and it'll send out the warning notification in such cases, so that we can avoid a road incident. So moving to V2N. So the vehicle to network is a technology that enables these vehicles to communicate with the network. This technology basically enables vehicles to access a large amount of data, such as real-time traffic conditions or weather information, and even access certain applications and services like navigation, entertainment, and driver assistant as well. So the V2N network basically can connect to the cloud, where all the data can be stored, and also vehicle related data that can be used by the automakers to improve on their products as well. That is what we have on V2X as of what we are seeing is it today. Over to Unmesh.
So yeah, like Ashutosh was mentioning, the evolution of V2X and how there are different products available based on the type of connectivity. There are a lot of companies or organizations who have already started implementing and adopting it. These could be direct manufacturers, car manufacturers trying to implement solutions. These could be third parties who are developing modules for these manufacturers and things like that. So what I will do is I will walk you through some of the case studies. These case studies are based on our past client experiences, based on certain engagements that we've done in the automotive sector, which is based on the V2X technology, which is explained earlier. So this particular slide that you're observing is about a vehicle to device communication. In this case, what was available was a data acquisition system. This data acquisition system would then fit into a vehicle's OBD port, which would fetch live vehicle diagnostic data, which is available both at a mobile application as well as a web or a cloud application modules. Then the user could then perform API queries to the cloud environment to gather information about vehicle location, the keyless driving, and certain other features on the infotainment systems. So on the right side of the slide, you would notice there are certain key vulnerabilities that we have identified. These are some, while there were a lot more, these are the top 5 that we would like to highlight as part of this case. The first one being insecure API endpoints. The thing about the thing about the vehicular infrastructure is the large volume. Unlike your normal IT systems or normal IT environments where you see limited number of servers or endpoints or devices, the volume when it comes to vehicles is much larger, volume as well as coverage. This would often lead to now, in cases of API implementations, you would need to have a credential or an authentication method implemented. But due to the large volume, often the tendency is to have weak or default authentication credentials, using of generic user IDs which are guessable. A combination of these will allow attackers to query these endpoints for unauthorized information. For example, if I'm a driver and I'm not allowed to query certain sensitive information of other drivers, or it could be where I am able to query certain parameters of the car and things like that. Once this particular information then is pushed from the car itself to the cloud infrastructure, this is part of V2I as well, where like Ashutosh was mentioning, this helps in performing live data analysis as well as post data analysis in certain cases where you based on the location and certain information you triangulate traffic congestion and certain other factors. The problem with this cloud infrastructure is often there are unexposed services, there are vulnerable components in use, and the data sources are not always trusted, right? So what happens in these cases is that as an attacker, if I do gain access to any of these critical services, I could then in either real time or from a saved database query live vehicle information. I could track location of these vehicles. I could, if they're storing information about the users, I can track their addresses, their names, and various other information that is stored in the database. Insecure key management. In insecure key management, what happens is that now, like I was mentioning earlier about the authentication and API endpoints, a lot of the times these devices use protocols like HTTP or MQTT, where they then push information to the cloud. To be able to do that, each car would have a unique key that is configured, and due to the nature of the environment and due to the volume of the vehicles, these keys don't usually expire very soon. They take anywhere between, we've seen examples where they take up to 10 years for a key to expire, and that is hard coded into the car as it goes, right? So any attacker who sniffs and gains access to these keys or identifies them hard-coded through some system on the vehicle will then be able to continuously use this information to feed false data to the servers to query certain sensitive information that is available. And a combination of this and the first attack could then again help in querying other driver information and things like that. Now, we were also earlier mentioning there is a mobile app component to this. This mobile app component primarily could be used by the drivers or by mechanics to gather live data on engine performance or any certain issues that the vehicle is facing. As part of these, sometimes data gets pushed as reports from the cloud. There is also reports that could be generated on the application itself. These reports are then stored in, say, a vulnerable S3 bucket or something like that is allowed to be listed. Any attacker who is able to gain access to that S3 URL will be able to then list all the vehicle reports of all the different users because they're often stored in a common location. So this is again an issue at both at an information leakage as well as at a privacy level if there are certain information that is stored in these reports. The last one is around rate limiting, which allows attackers to perform brute force attacks on these servers. For example, like I was mentioning about guessable IDs earlier, where, say, for example, you have an endpoint where you can query vehicle information based on a user ID parameter, right? And if that parameter, say, is a 4-character or a 5-character parameter, 5-character numeric parameter, that could easily be guessed with brute force attempts. And when rate limiting is not implemented on at the application level, this allows the attacker to then query and identify other user data as well. So these are some of the key issues that we've identified as part of this case. We'll move on to the next one. So this particular case is an example of V2I, vehicle to infrastructure, which was a traffic management solution that was implemented citywide by one of our clients. So these citywide, they were certain smart devices that were implemented along the road infrastructure, which would then capture Bluetooth broadcast requests from the different modules that are installed on the car. Now, each of these Bluetooth broadcast requests had unique addresses that was assigned to that particular vehicle, which was then tracked on a database on what belongs to which broadcast address belongs to whom. Using this information, the city throughout the city, then they were able to create correlated data using correlation and understanding these traffic flow. They were then able to analyze and identify improvement projects, road improvement projects, where there needs to be better efficiency needs to achieve in high congestion areas and things like that. Now, the problem with an infrastructure that this big is there are certain attack vectors that come along with it. These are on the right hand side. Again, we have 5 key attack vectors that we've observed in these cases. The first one is around default credentials, where you have these devices that sit both at the road infrastructure level and as well as on the car, but more true with the road infrastructure level. These devices often have applications running on them, or they have access to certain configurations. Due to the large volume of these devices, often for the management of this device, a common default credential is kept for the ease of management across these devices, which allows any attacker who tries to tap into this device will help him gain access to this device, which then connect to a network of devices across the city. He could then use that to create like a botnet network, or he could use that to laterally move to different devices and things like that. While we're talking about Bluetooth, at least the older versions of Bluetooth has multiple vulnerabilities. It could be clear text protocols. It could be using use of weak keys, and the way the protocol inherently works itself has also a wide range of vulnerabilities. So though in this particular case, when there is a legacy version of protocol that is in use, often this helps or this aids the attacker in performing spoofing attacks or replay attacks, where he's able to create fake data points or data entries into these infrastructure to create fake congestions or fake endpoints. This, while it is a long shot, this could be used by somebody who wants to get who wants to change the infrastructure to their benefit. Feed false data to the city transportation network. The next one is around insecure network architecture. Like I was mentioning, there is a large volume of these devices. These devices then often directly connect to a particular gateway or an endpoint where the data is pushed, which would then probably make this network a flat network, right? So the problem with a flat network is that compromise of a particular device will give you access to sometimes unrestricted access to all devices within the same layer or within the same network, which will then allow an attacker to either compromise multiple devices or laterally move from a device to another. In some cases, for example, if it is, say, there are direct default default strings configured for writing into a database, then an attacker can then perform SQL injection attacks and things like that on at a network level. So, having an insecure network infrastructure without clear segregation and separation will allow an attacker to penetrate into the network. He could then use it to modify the data, delete data, and perform similar actions. Like I was talking about the insecure application, the last point that we have around here is around unauthorized access to sensitive information. Like I was mentioning, a combination of the above vulnerabilities could allow an attacker to gain unauthorized access to this information. That could be through admin portals that are exposed. It could be due to applications running on the device with vulnerable controls, improper privilege mapping, and things like that. Unauthorized information in this cases, in cases of automotive, mostly could include information such as location information, vehicle diagnostic data, and things like that. Moving on to the next case that we have, that is around the vehicle to vehicle. So in this case, one of our clients had implemented a collision detection and a driver behavior monitoring system. So what this particular system had is it had an onboard camera, which could be mounted on the device, and it also had a local microprocessor based setup, which would then do live image processing and analytics on the data. It also had connectivity to the device, to the vehicle itself, which would capture live data on the vehicle. And a combination of this was then used to help the driver in avoiding collisions, say in cases where he is over speeding and there is a vehicle that comes in front and things like that. It would then give both active as well as passive feedback to the driver in terms of hitting the brakes or performing certain actions accordingly. Now, in this typical kind of infrastructure, there is no connectivity. I mean, there is limited connectivity, or the connectivity to cloud is not always in real time, because in some cases what happens is that you don't have the right network infrastructure, you don't have signals to transmit and things like that. So you can't have a collision system that depends on the cloud. So that's when they try to implement a local device which will do the analysis on the ground and then push data to the cloud, not in real time, but maybe whenever the signal is available. Here we would see similar vulnerabilities, like I was mentioning, due to the large volume of devices. They could have default credentials configured on them. They could have an insecure onboard web application. So what happens in cases where there are scaled devices like these, where analysis happens on the local device itself, it often has a kind of a flavor of Linux running on it with an environment, and it has an application that is application server that is running on the device itself, which will then host an application. In most cases, these applications are mostly used for debugging purposes, or for checking what is the status and any device diagnostics that needs to be done to debug any issues on the device, whether it is not reporting to the server or whether it is not able to, or it's generating false data. These applications could be you could use these applications to do that. So what happens is that when most of these systems often are not replaced or updated or patched very often, due to which they run on outdated versions of protocols, outdated version of libraries or server components that are running, which more often than you can imagine, lead to remote code executions, say vulnerable to attacks on the portal itself, no proper authentication or authorization or session management modules implemented, and things like that. At a hardware level, unlike smaller footprinted devices, which are microcontroller based, these microprocessor devices often have USB ports, they have HDMI ports, they have JTAG ports, and different kind of hardware ports which are there, both from connectivity purposes as well as analysis or debug purposes. These ports will in some cases give access to unauthorized access to certain components of the device. For example, if the device has a JTAG or a UART port that is running on that, as an attacker or as the driver, he can then attempt to connect to those ports and tap into the device operating system or running firmwares, and modify configurations, modify live data. The hardware components could be running vulnerable versions of components, such as, say, a legacy flash device. And as an attacker, he could then attempt to do a memory dump to see, get the firmware files, get the operating system files that are stored on those devices, and things like that. Also, in some cases, what happens is that while this is a little less occurring scenario, there is data that is fed back into the onto the device, onto the CAN bus, or onto the device components, either from a feedback perspective or from a corrective action perspective. These interfaces follow clear text protocols, or follow insecure version of these protocols, which then the attacker can use to, say, for example, I'm remotely sitting and I compromise the device, and the device in turn has access to the internal ECU or other critical components on the car. As an attacker, I can attempt to remotely change certain actions, or create sudden braking, or perform these certain other actions like that. Like we've covered in the previous case, most of these devices, again, still have connectivity to the cloud. They do perform some form of analytics and dashboarding functions on the cloud, which means there are a bunch of services that either, in some cases, what happens is that, say, if it is not a B2B, it is a B2C kind of an environment where you have the entire world accessing your dashboards and applications to individual users. In those cases, these services are exposed to everybody on the internet. So any misconfigurations that are there, any improper privilege mappings that are there, could help an attacker to dump these vehicle diagnostic information, live location data, or any other critical user information, leading to data leakage and other privacy concerns that come along with it. So moving on to the next case, this is a vehicle to network kind of an infrastructure where there is, say, a fleet management platform that was implemented. This was, say, majorly used in trucks or these long goods vehicles that are used to transport high volume goods from between intercities or interstates. So there is a particular device that was implemented that would help the owners of these vehicles to track the device locations, the fuel levels, the other engine parameters on the engine health, if there are any issues, and things like that. So this, while the platform uploaded these devices onto the cloud, to a certain extent, some of this information was also processed locally. Now, this particular device was using a clear text protocol, and there was no session management implemented, which allowed us into the first attack on message replay. Now, even if in some cases where there is authentication encryption enabled at a protocol level, if there is no proper session management, replay attacks are often possible. By using captured network traffic, you could perform replay attacks, which will then again feed false data. If there is a clear text protocol allowed, then the driver could then attempt to spoof the driver or the attacker could then attempt to spoof the location of the device, give false information to the owner on the fuel levels, and things like that. And the device itself had, say, an SD card implementation or certain had a web application, like I was mentioning in the earlier case. It has a web app on itself running, where there was weak authentication, where we were able to exploit that particular application to perform a blind SQL injection and a combination of blind SQL and then a malicious file upload. We were able to gain operating system level access to the device, and then due to the legacy nature of the environment, be able to perform privilege escalation and gain root access to these devices. So once you gain access to the devices, again, the attack vectors could span anywhere between compromising other devices if they are reachable and within the same network environment, because often these SIM providers provide a private network to these devices, a private environment for them, so that they can communicate. So these devices, if they're all residing within the same range, it allows an attacker to then attempt lateral movement and things like that. He could gain access to unauthorized information that usually is not available to the driver. For example, it could involve information that the owner wants to, only the owner would like to see, or somebody who's managing all these different vehicles would like to have. And in certain cases, like I was mentioning, encryption mechanisms, this could be encryption to data that is leaving the device. It could also mean, say, if there are 2-3 different boards that are communicating to each other, say there's protocols, industry common protocols like Modbus or anything that, or HTTP, not HTTPS, or similar variants of clear text protocols that are there, or Bluetooth as well, right? If they do not have encryption enabled on these protocols, that would mean that an attacker can sniff or view these information in clear text and then perform targeted attacks based on that. The insecure API here in this case, we were able to use these insecure APIs to perform unauthorized firmware updates on the device. Now, there are two possible cases here. One where the user itself can update the firmware and the firmware file is available on the internet. The two is there are API calls made that can be made to upgrade a single or a batch of devices with a particular firmware. So what the organization was doing is the path to the firmware file was a URL, which was then fed into an API endpoint, which then allowed the device to query that API endpoint and then fetch the firmware file and do a local update. Luckily, in our case, the firmware was not encrypted. There was no signature that was implemented, signature-based protection that was implemented on the firmware, which allowed us, or in general cases, an attacker to perform reverse engineering on the firmware, to repackage the firmware with, say, our own malicious shell code. We were then able to push, use the API endpoint to push the firmware file on the device platform and upgrade that particular device. So once you've done that particular shell code get executed, and then now we could have a botnet network of devices which we can then perform targeted attacks. One, you could of course gain access to live location, vehicle parameters and things like that. And in some cases, like I was mentioning earlier, where you have write access back into the device, write access back into the vehicle, where you could perform certain controls or make the vehicle perform in a certain way that is not desired by the driver. Then us as an attacker or an attacker in general can then perform those vehicle to cause road accidents, could cause injury to property or life as it is. I think on the point of clear text protocols, I've highlighted enough in the previous cases. Over to you, Harsha. Probably you could take them through the ways to secure these different vulnerabilities.
Thanks, Unmesh. So, largely from what we have understood across various attack vectors that we have seen, either from what Ashutosh has spoken about V2X or from the case studies that Unmesh spoke about, there are largely the fixes or the remediation paths that we can be categorized into 4 different pillars. So if you were to look at fixes that need to be, or rather the concerns that need to be looked into, could be one on the car itself. The other would be on the communication channels that the car opens up from the car to the different infrastructure components, as well as the applications, the V2X devices, the cars, as well as the infrastructure also hosts within them, and the entire ecosystem within which these connected cars reside within. So with respect to the car itself, we have, I think within ASRG, there have been enough number of webinars that have spoken about various different attack vectors, such as unauthorized access to CAN buses, replay attacks, and so on and so forth. So there has to be a certain mechanism through which these networks, individual networks within the car itself, can be hardened, which is to say that the certain buses within the car itself are also hardened in such a way that unauthorized applications and devices do not easily can access them. Then also the applications that have been installed on, let's say, the infotainment systems, the way it can be installed on the infotainment systems are also restricted in a manner such that a third party or a malicious application or a malicious USB cannot probably install these applications on those systems. Secure key management systems also important, because we have seen enough examples, and also Unmesh gave an example of from one of our case studies where we had seen that the way the car communicates back to the infrastructure platform or the infrastructure component, the kind of keys that were used to manage were quite old, or rather the lifetime of the keys were quite high, which made it difficult for issuing refresh keys every now and then, and also having these keys refreshed in case of an incident, so on and so forth. So in addition to this, I think we have also seen car manufacturers today implementing various types of restrictions in terms of how the network is segmented within the car, which is to say that restricting safety signals to go, or the safety signals or messages to go onto the common databases where the ECU communicates, is something that the car manufacturers have been doing in some of the modern cars that we have seen. And also with respect to the over-the-air updates that the car systems receive, is also something that needs a bit of a consideration around, because these over-the-air updates like we had seen in some of the components that we have assessed. The over-the-air updates are one of the most critical parts or components that areas that need to be looked into, because a firmware coming in from a third external word into the car is something that can be manipulated with, and also the integrity of the firmware can be meddled around with a person who is probably sitting between the server as well as the car. Also, the fact that the firmwares are not checked often. I mean, in terms of the integrity of the firmware is not very checked very often by the systems that they're being pushed upon, is the fact that these vulnerable or malicious firmwares can be pushed onto the cars to cause significant impact. The second category of the fixes that we foresee also may happen in the future, are also happening right now, is around the communication channels the car opens up to. We have seen enough attack scenarios or the demonstrations around the key fobs being replayed, the replay attacks that can be done through the key fobs, where the cars can be unlocked by capturing the radio signals the key fobs transfer. Whereas there have been fixes around this that the car manufacturers have been already working upon. However, I think there can be a more robust implementation of this that can be implemented as well. So the key pairs and the exchange of random sequence codes also is important. Use of secure communication channels for both wireless as well as wired communication channels that we get to see on the car is something that needs some consideration that needs to go into, because the kind of communication channels a connected car opens up these days, be it Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, all have some of the inherent risk that they are already being dealt with as it is. On top of it, the way any misconfiguration in terms of how they have been implemented within the car also matters, and these aspects around how their configuration, what kind of risks it leads to, needs to be looked into when they are being implemented in a car. The fact that most of the connected car infrastructure is moving towards latest telecom technologies like 5G and 4G. There have been attacks that have been demonstrated in the past, which basically lets a attacker perform man-in-the-middle sort of an attack on older versions of broadband communication. So these communication channels have inherent risks with them. So an attacker can probably force the car to speak on older communication channels, have an MITM attack conducted on them, and in order to steal information as well. So having a strict adherence to what communication channels are used by a connected car to communicate back to the backend infrastructure also does matter. So that also needs some consideration that needs to be put into place. In terms of the application itself, there are various different applications, as we have seen in some of the examples that we spoke about today. The applications could be the application that are installed on the infotainment system. It could be the application that is provided with the car, which resides on your mobile phone. It could be an application that is probably locally available within the car to probably manage some of the components within the car itself. Or it could be an application that is available on the internet to manage your car remotely. So all of these applications all put together form an ecosystem of a connected car. Although it provides usability aspect, I think some of these applications also need to have security considerations around it that needs to be put in place. So as to say that any sort of web application related vulnerabilities are being dealt with before they are implemented or integrated within the car's ecosystem, something that needs to be looked into. Some of these aspects that we have seen in connected cars ecosystem have been around segregation of the API calls, insecure API functions, insecure API endpoints, and also the fact that some of these API endpoints also do not have any sort of authentication or authorization methods that have been implemented. So those sort of implementations are something that needs to be looked into. Along with that, since the car always communicates back to the infrastructure through API calls, either for communicating the data, the telematics, dashboard information, diagnostic information as well. The firmware is also communicated via the same channel. So there needs to be a proper PKI infrastructure encryption mechanisms that need to be put in place such that these communication that happen between the car and the backend infrastructure is secure. And also they are not susceptible to attacks such as man in the middle or hijacking of certain information during transit and so on and so forth. In terms of the firmware itself, since the applications that are installed on the infotainment system or any other systems within the car resides on a firmware, there needs to be a thorough check of the firmware when it comes in through as an update from locally through an SD card or through a USB port or over the air update, because the firmware, while it does provide you with updates to the car itself, it also, if it is coming from an untrusted source, could introduce malicious vulnerabilities or could introduce vulnerabilities into the car's ecosystem. So, which may have collateral effect on other components within the car. So, when you're securing the car and the surrounding infrastructure, it also is important to have the backend infrastructure the car connects to. This could be a cloud platform that the car could connect to, or it could be some sort of a solution that resides on the cloud infrastructure that it connects to. So all of these infrastructure also plays a vital role in securing the ecosystem. So using secure communication channels to interact with the cloud environment also does matter, and restricting the data that is shown from these platforms to the user or different types of roles that are available within the platform also does matter. So that's also something that needs to be taken into consideration. Also, the fact that access to third-party components and add-ons which modify and gather this information needs to be taken care of, because since you might be dealing with overlapping interests from various different uh, uh, third parties and vendors that may be providing you with various different services, you may want to integrate, or there might be a need to integrate these services securely into the platform such that they do not introduce any new vulnerabilities into the car's connected ecosystem. And also the fact that one of the points that Unmesh also touched upon is the fact that the services that are exposed also need to be looked into from the cloud infrastructure down towards the car, the services that are exposed to the car as well, because services that may provide you with privileged access to maybe one of the administrative consoles or something like that may also lead to the attacker having privileged access to either the car or the backend infrastructure that will have again a lateral effect on other components that are surrounding the entire ecosystem. So all in all, I think the whole thing put together, it's not a matter of when you're talking about V2X as one of the ecosystems for connected cars, it's not a matter of connecting or securing connected car in individuality, but it's also a matter of securing the surrounding infrastructure that is widespread. Because we are talking about infrastructure that is not only present within the car's ecosystem, but also something that could be managed by a third party. It could be managed by various different stakeholders. It could be to do with different devices provided by different OEMs, different specs, different car manufacturers. So it does introduce and it does make the entire ecosystem a lot more complex than we think it should be. And I think the future does look like it, although it gets more connected and it gets more usable, it also does look a little more complex in terms of security and the way it would operate in the future. So that would be all from our end for this webinar. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.